Our last episode of Life Talks was kind of an introduction to a series we're going to be doing on biblical masculinity and biblical femininity. We're starting with the guys this time, but we kind of laid a framework on what does the Bible say, but also just what can we be doing as role models, as parents, as people who have voice in the lives of the next generation, and counter some of the messages of perhaps tradition or that are archaic, that weren't healthy, that weren't biblical, that may come from previous generations, and then also the ones that have emerged in recent generations, so that we've kind of created this toxic soup of hypermasculinity or non-masculinity or fluidity, and there is a range. We're going to acknowledge that, but there are some principles that I believe the Scripture reinforces with us, and there's not the book of how to teach your kid to be a masculine leader or whatever, but I think there's some principles. And I think there's some things that are obvious and apparent in the design of nature and how God created us that we want to discuss. You may not always agree, but we can always have a conversation about it. My name is Dan. I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm joined today by Josh Brahm, who is the president and founder of the Equal Rights Institute and is our executive producer. So Josh, we started this last week, and I'm not going to go back because I want to make sure I get through the rest of the list today. But you've got 3 boys.
Yep.
And I've got 2. My boys were completely different. I have one boy who he was born to play with a ball. I mean, it didn't matter what, football, basketball, baseball, he loved it. Another son who did not care about athletics at all. Do you find diversity among your boys as well?
Yeah. We've had short periods of time of involvement with sports and interest in sports, but nothing that really kind of stuck. Right now, one of my sons is getting interested in the drums and in music, and so we're kind of getting into that. But then like sometimes a lot lately, I mean, we're getting ready to move. We're selling our house. And so we're kind of like, they're all having to help in that way. That's kind of like the masculinity is like, you all need to step up and help mom and dad in bigger ways. And so having them help like take down the deck outside and help with things like that. But I was going to say like, one of the things I think that we've been doing that fosters a sort of a healthy masculinity that I wish that had been more common when I was a kid, and maybe it was more common when you were a kid, frankly, but I think things are bouncing back. But the idea of being able to allow kids to go out on their own and spend time without constant parental supervision. And
I think I call that free range parenting in some circles. Yeah.
So we're trying to get back into that. Jonathan Haidt has a lot of really good stuff in this. So being able to send our kids out and they can go on the nature trail in our neighborhood or other places, and like we know where they are. Yeah. They're fine. But giving them that freedom is something that wasn't as common when I was a kid, and that can be potentially.
Can you imagine if during Bible days they had our current posture? David would never have gone.
My goodness, right?
I mean, he was out killing lions and tigers and bears, back, when he was a young teenager. And then he goes out and slaying giants.
Video games all the time.
He wouldn't have known a sling from, Or even in the New Testament, one of my favorite stories, and this guy, we don't even know this kid's name, was the boy who brought his lunch to the feeding of the 5,000. Just stop and think about that. There was a mom who got up one morning and said, "I'm packing you a lunch so you can."
The only mom who did that.
Yeah, so you could run across wherever it is, go to this big gathering place, which was mostly grown-ups, and listen to this teacher who she didn't know what he was teaching, and go listen to him. And next thing you know, the Lord's using the lunch that she packed for her kid.
I mean, the children were coming up to him, right?
Yes.
Like he was,
yeah. And today we'd be like, don't talk to strangers, right. Which I'm not saying we shouldn't say, but so this notion that we need to be proactive in the development, this portion of our child's development, I think is really, really important. Every kid's different, and so we have to be wise in how we handle it, and we ought to be thinking. So I left off last time ready to talk a little bit about giving kids real responsibilities. I love what you just said. We're moving. You're in this family.
Yep.
You're going to be part of this process.
Yep.
Yeah. You're not just going to watch. You're not going to just
Right.
And you know,
because the last time we moved, they were too young. When we moved from from California to here, they were too young. My poor wife was pregnant and everything. It was hard, and they weren't able to do much stuff. Now they're 12, 14, and 16. Yeah, they can step up and do some more chores, and we're very generous to them when they do. We're very much give some extra screen time or give a reward or something when they really step up. We're making sure we let them know like they did a great job when they did a great job. But there's also kind of we're all having to step up, and that's not just for over 18-year-olds. Yeah. Like at an age appropriate level, let's all kind of do this together. Yeah, because quite frankly, when you've got kids 12, 14, and 16, you've got young men. Yeah. Yeah. And in 10 years, all of them will be at that age where we could have expectations that they be acting like men, that they be showing leadership. We are prepping them for adulthood. Prepping them for adulthood, and that ought to be done intentionally, which is part of my overall reason for doing this theme, and giving them real responsibilities. You know why most parents don't give kids responsibilities? Because they mess them up too often. Is it easier to do it themselves? Absolutely, 100%. That's absolutely why. Yeah, and I thought this. My dad. I don't want to deal with all the fighting. Yeah, my dad, because he was he was a farmer and a railroad engineer, so he worked 2 jobs, basically 2 full-time jobs, which I always have as well. But there were times, like to this day, the only thing I can do on my car is change a tire and change the oil. Now, again, cars are a lot different today than they were in those days, but my dad would say, okay, I want to teach you how to do this, and we get 30 seconds into it, and I would be doing it wrong or not fast enough, and he'd finally say, just give me that. Just give me that. Even things around the farm or whatever, my dad had a pretty volatile temper. Yeah. And I dreaded when he asked me to help him because I never knew what I was going to do, not fast enough or well enough, or let a cow get by me or something like that. And then I was going to have to deal with the explosion to follow, and I was scared of him. I was a little twerp, and he was 6'3", and he was loud, and so we have to be mindful that part of giving our kids real responsibilities is giving them the space to fail. Yes. The space to learn. Yes. Yeah. I wish this had been done better in my childhood. I'll give one kind of vulnerable example of how dads can, like, I'm hearing your example, and yours is a clear one of kind of this explosion. You can harm kids without exploding. So I remember one time I had one of those, what do they call them it's like the weed whackers or whatever. Yeah. You're trying to like mold bushes. Yeah, like for sculpt them, Yeah, so it's not actually a weed whacker; it's a hedge trimmer type thing. Hedge trimmer thing, yeah. And it had a big electric cord, it had a big extension cord, and we had a lot of these things to do. I'm probably 15 or 14 or something like that. And I remember my dad emphasizing to me in the beginning, it's very important to not cut the electrical cord. If there's one thing you don't do, don't cut the electrical cord, because it would cost $20 to replace back in, the early 90s or whatever this was. And so I'm out there, I'm doing my best. I'm a perfectionist. I'm doing, I'm very, very much about pleasing my parents, and I accidentally cut the cord. And it crushed me. It crushed me so much more than they were expecting. I think Dad kind of tried to like undo a little bit of the whatever, but it was kind of a bit too late at that point. Like I felt horrible and still remember that feeling to this day.
Still talking about it 20 years later.
Yes. And he didn't explode. He didn't yell. He was just like, anyway.
And to me, and here's the mindset I wished I'd done better at. Now my kids are adults. I wished I'd done better at. They're actually, those moments are opportunities. Yes. So you come in, Dad, I'm so sorry. I cut the extension cord. It can be, okay, now we have an opportunity to learn how to repair an extension cord. That's really what you have. And I've seen why. You know how to do that. Yeah. Well, I say that because in my garage are 2 halves of an extension cord that I literally cut with a hedge trimmer. Yeah. And I actually now have a battery powered hedge trimmer, but I still have the 2 halves of the extension cord because I don't want
the same. We are the same.
I don't want to throw it away. I want to fix it.
Yeah, no, that is an opportunity. It would have been great for Dad to say, you know what? Mistakes happen. Yeah. I've made mistakes sometimes. Let's go together to Home Depot and get that. Like, there was an opportunity to make that happen. Yep. So, like, something that I'm trying to do with my kids to make sure that they don't have this, like, my kids they get annoyed now how often I say I have a little pattern, a little sequence I came up with. I will surprise them. I'll be like, hey, William, I'll make them think I'm going to say something else. And then what I have to say is, I love you, I like you, and I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And at this point, they're like, I'm never going to be able to forget it. Like, if you say it so often, like, they're like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Because it's like the game is now about, like, surprising them, about being able to sneak that into things.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't want them ever to be able to forget, even when things are hard or whatever, Dad loves them and likes them and is proud of them.
And I don't think we appreciate the power of that intentionality. When you do stuff like that and they roll their eyes and and they'll miss it and they'll use it later on for their own kids, but they'll miss it when it's not there. I had the weirdest thing happen. I was in Cuba for my son's birthday. He turned 28. He's a Marine. He's married.
Goodness.
He's got a kid,
Yeah.
right? And I always took my kids to breakfast or lunch or dinner, almost always breakfast when they were little. But as they've gotten older, it's harder. And I missed his birthday because I was in Cuba. So I came back and I said, we're going to do lunch today.
Nice.
So we're sitting at lunch. I'm just glad to be anywhere at this point. I forgot, I was just there with my son at lunch, just trying to do my dad duty. And I hear him say, you didn't get me a candle, I hope. Now, here's the deal. Every birthday for every kid, I sneak in a candle, and somehow during the meal, either I get a waitress to do it, a wait person to do it, or somebody, but I get that candle on their plate and light it, and they just roll their eyes. Dad, this is so stupid. I'm 20. And
do you sing the song? Do you do the whole?
Oh yeah, anything I can do to humiliate the kids, I will do it. But I forgot the candle.
Oh,
and I didn't want to admit it. So I don't know what are you talking about? You're 28 years old, and I panicked. The reason he brought it up was not because he didn't want it, but because he was expecting it from Dad. And I think deep down, he kind of wanted to see how's Dad going to pull it off this year.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was at this great place that they had a candle, and they brought him out a free dessert afterwards, and he thought I was behind it, and I wasn't. Well,
it was an awesome restaurant.
Yeah, the recovery.
But you
was
made that happen. That was a good recovery.
Yeah, here you go. I got my 28-year-old son, father in Marine and so forth. He still wants his birthday candle. But those kind of things, I think, like I love you, I like you, and I'm proud of you. Those are really, really powerful words of affirmation, which I'm going to talk about it later on. But giving real responsibilities, age-appropriate chores, having one of them lead in prayer over the meal, having them go with you when you're doing something important, helping someone, helping others, going to do something kind for a neighbor, but bringing them along to be a part of that blessing. All of these instill a sense of purpose and leadership in young men that are important. Yep. And you look at them and you say, someday you're going to be a dad. Someday you're going to be a father. Someday you're going to be a husband. Someday you're going to be a neighbor. This is what we do. We protect others that have needs. We serve others who are in vulnerable situations. We stand up. And when you repeat that, you say, oh, it sounds like I'm bragging on myself. No, you're not. You're training them. You're showing, I do this on purpose. Even when I don't feel like doing it, even when there are other things I could be doing, intentionally, I live my life with others in mind. That's a biblical virtue, which brings me to another one, and that is, let them take safe risks.
Yes.
We were talking about this, but so I think I heard you say something. I want to explore it. Yeah. Did you say they're tearing down the deck on the back of your house?
Yeah. They I mean, I know that my wife was somewhat involved too. But yes, we had them doing a lot of that work and putting the boards in a pile.
So there are nails.
Yep.
There are tools.
Yep.
There are crowbars.
Yep.
Yeah.
All those hammers and all that stuff.
You were using hedge trimmers, which could take a finger off.
Yeah.
The learning those behaviors, how to handle them safely. What happens is we allow the worst case scenarios to serve as our mainstream scenarios, and they're not. And my mom will tell you this. She was a pretty overprotective mom, particularly when I was younger, because when she had me and I was 3 or 4 years old, her 15-year-old brother was killed in a farming accident. You don't have something like that happen. It just absolutely just destroys your world. And she had largely raised him, as the big sister, the only sister. And it devastated to this day. It's been 60 years and she still cries, misses him. And so, but that scenario that this could happen, I can remember my dad saying, you know what? we still need to take the risks. We still need to let him drive a tractor.
Yeah.
Which was where the
So I don't know if we're perfectly balanced on this or not, because like I have to admit now, like after all the boards did get put sort of in a pile, eventually my son did step on one of the nails, and then my wife and I ended up doing the rest of the dangerous part of it, of just getting rid of the stuff where nails were sticking up. Like there was a point where, because there was grass overgrowing, it was kind of hard to see even when people were
Well,
being
you
careful.
have to use wisdom.
Yes.
You have to use, but I think also you have to use intentionality.
Yeah.
So there are times when you say, okay, get a new extension cord out and keep on trucking, right? And there'll be times when you say, okay, let's get a Band-Aid on that. You've got your tetanus shot, so you're good.
Right.
So yeah, you're going to limp a little bit, but we still got a job to finish. So that might not be the same for a 12-year-old or 16-year-old, and every kid's different. But no, I think the value is in asking the questions and being willing to confront what we may do almost out of a reaction rather than an intentional response.
Yeah.
So another thing is, I think it's important. I think that we affirm God-given differences between males and females. And I think this is an important part of male leadership. When I had 2 boys and 2 girls. My oldest and my youngest are boys, and my middle 2 are girls. We had a rule in my house. You can fuss, you can fight, you can argue, you can debate, you can even like wrestle in the pool and those kind of things, but you can never in anger raise your hand to your sister.
Yeah.
Even when my girls would get upset with my boys, that was not an opportunity for them to say, well, she started, or she did it, or she hit me first. Right. There was never a circumstance.
And that probably would have been the case even if the girls were the oldest, right? Like if it was like teenage girls and your 6-year-old son, you're going to be like, you don't ever strike a woman.
Yeah. And I don't ever recall that my boys, and they were not and are not perfect, but I don't ever recall them doing anything more than sassing their mom, and that got a big response from me. You're not, and I would literally say, you'll not talk to my wife or your mother that way. Yep. And a reason of that, and I would tell them, guys, I believe that God has created men to lead, love, provide, and protect. You see this in Scripture. Yeah. So leadership involves protection. And it involves loving and providing. The motivation is love, and it is protection because you're responsible to make sure things get done. And loving someone requires selflessness. They're all interconnected. They're all 4 facets of the same principle. But we have to gently and clearly teach our young men how God designed men and women as equal in value, but they're different in role and purpose. And we won't get through all of this as much as I wanted to, this list, but I'm going to have one more episode on this at the end. But one of the things...
Never happens.
Yeah, it never does happen as much as I try. I think one of the things that we have to be willing to do is be countercultural in this, because so many of the images that are coming out of the media and common culture today are not willing to teach the nuances between equality of value and equality of design. Men cannot have children, period, end of discussion. Women are not as strong as men unless unless there is some kind of extenuating circumstance. And I've met some women I would not arm wrestle. I get that.
My wife would probably beat me in an arm wrestling contest. She's way healthier than I am. She actually does weights and I don't. So she would probably beat me if she actually
But for the
tried.
most part, I mean, how many movies have I seen where this woman who's 5'4", weighs 130 pounds, soaking wet and full of bananas, walks into a room where there's 6 guys who are like bodyguards, and she taekwondoes them into a mess on the floor, one at a time.
If she's an assassin, if she's in the Avengers, then I can believe it.
And again, the Avengers are comic book fantasy characters. But here's this happened to someone I know pretty well. They were in the military, and they got a female officer who literally walked up and said, "I just want you to know I can take any one of you." And the guys are like, right. And she took that as a challenge. She said, okay, one by one, you're going to fight me. And the first guy that fought her decked her. And she got up and she left the room. But later on, I found out she literally had been taught that her skills were sufficient that she would be able to overpower men who were just brutally stronger than her. I think we set up both men and women for inappropriate engagement and interaction on other levels if we're not really, really careful. I want my daughter has got a stronger personality than I do times 10. I call her my warrior princess, but she's also 5'2" and weighs 110 pounds. And yeah, she's given birth to 4 kids, and I will tell you, I am not capable of that kind of strength. But I will also tell you this, that I'm bigger and badder, and should be. And she has a husband now who understands that role and protects her with gentle godliness. But she did not always have that in her life. She loves that. She celebrates that. She celebrates that in her boys. Yeah. And I think it's really important that we counter the argument that is dominating our culture right now that basically screams there are no significant differences between the men and women. That's one of the things I think is being debated in our culture by people like Riley Gaines and so forth, is that transgender people are being told that they can that they can compete on an equal level in spite of the biological differences that have existed and the uniqueness of the roles which God has done. And to me, it is destroying women's sports. If I had a daughter right now, interestingly though, I'm not like some rigid fundamentalist on this. My daughter, I literally let her play on the boys' baseball teams when she was little, because there wasn't that much difference. Puberty hadn't kicked in. They were all about the same level. And I remember the first time she came up to bat, it was so hilarious. She came up to bat, all the boys moved in, and they're cat calling. They had a girl up to bat. And she parked that ball so far over their heads, and she got like a double, and everybody's like, whoa.
Right.
Yeah. But when she turned 16 or 15, there was no way that was still going to be the case. I actually put her on there intentionally because I wanted her to be a better ball player, and she was going to be competing against boys. That was going to be it. I mean, there was intention. That and the fact I didn't have to go to nearly as many practices because she and her brother are on the same team. But I think one of the things that we can do is celebrate the fact that God has created us intentionally to complement each other. That the things that I can provide for my wife, there are things that my wife can provide for me that are unique, based on design, based on the presence of hormones, based on the difference in assignments, and in doing that, we can fulfill our responsibility for men to lead, to love, to provide, and protect, and do it in a way that encourages and builds up, that doesn't demean and put down. And if we're doing it in a way that demeans and puts down, if we become tyrants, if we become toxic, then we're missing a biblical element of the character and development that we should be teaching our children, and that we should be living out as models for our kids as well. So again, a lot of times we get overwhelmed by this, and so we do nothing, or we let somebody else do the educating. So the purpose of this series that we will continue in our next episode is so that we can have these conversations and ask what is there that the Scripture says that I should be doing within the parameters of my family, within the parameters of my community, that celebrates the uniqueness of our design in a way that is good for our community, good for our family, and which glorifies God. Because every time we fulfill God's intention and design for us, it is a good thing that glorifies Him and allows us to be able to see just a small glimpse into His wonder, majesty, and creativity. So, as always, thanks so much for listening to us at Life Talks. We'll pick this up again in a couple of days. I hope that you'll tell others about us on social media. But until next time, thanks for joining us here at Life Talks.